Coming up on this week's episode of Hiphopnowpodcast, the year was 1998.
But let's get right to the business.
Read these headlines. This album must be gone. This album must be gone.
Classic albums are. Classic albums are.
Come to Hip Hop Podcast now.
What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now Podcast Extra, on location, vacation, mini vacation, hence the sound quality, but whatever, it's all good, as long as you can hear me. Do say weekend return, you know what I mean? We're not going to make this a habit. It just so happens that a brother's recording it at a certain time, and it happens. Sometimes it happens. But if you're listening to this for the first time, this is a podcast designed to catch you up on all things hip-hop music and culture. I do appreciate those that tune in every week, that share this podcast with those they know would enjoy this type of hip-hop content, and definitely appreciate those who may have seen a post from a friend and say, oh, word, I like podcasts. Let me check out this podcast. But this particular episode is solely dedicated to the hip-hop albums of the year 1998. Now, if you don't know, and maybe you're new to this, maybe you missed an episode, but a couple of months back, I did an entire podcast dedicated to the year 1988. To me, right in the crux of the golden era of hip-hop, don't debate me. It is. But the podcast did very well for me. Mainly because the thing is, hip hop fans who were around during that time. It's a lot of nostalgia attached to that. Also those who may have known of certain albums, but didn't, know some details, or, wasn't really into hip hop back then. You get some context. And 1988 was a fantastic year, dope year, whatever you want to call it, lit, funky fresh. Now, funky fresh was a little bit earlier, but for hip hop and music in general, black music in particular. So last year I did something pretty similar where I did like 2005, and, I think I did 1992, and I want to keep doing these, but I want them to be something that's annual. So if you notice, if you peep the pattern, the 1988 joint I did around the springtime. Now we in the thick of summer. It's July. So now we doing what did I say? The 1988 thing. I think I said it right. Who knows? This is a deuce. But I did that in the spring. And I'm recording this one in the summer. And when I go up another 10 years, that'll be in the fall, probably around Labor Day. So stay tuned for that. We're going to talk about these albums. First and foremost, you need to subscribe to this channel because we're going to keep the hip hop information coming. Hit that like button and comment if you hear some things here, got some thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts are, man. It's important. It's dope that people listen. But it's more important to me also that you comment when you have a thought, maybe something I left out, maybe, just something I didn't think about that maybe you put me on to, and maybe I'll go back and listen, or whatever the case may be. So, with all that being said, let's get right into the business at hand. This dude say, man, it's crazy. Just want to warn y'all. So this is the thing. The reason why I chose to do 1998 is because 1988 serves as the 30th anniversary of all of those albums I mentioned in that podcast episode, including a couple that I didn't mention. And obviously I can't get to them all. And we have the same thing here. Everything here is 20 years old. And for somebody like me, who was getting ready to soon graduate. I was in college, but I was getting close to the end. Not at the finish line. I graduated in 2000, but making some leeway to hear that all of these albums came out 20 years ago. Time flies, man. Time flies. But let's just name off a couple of albums that did drop in the year 1998. If you're looking at the cover of this podcast, you can already see, so I'm going to just run them down. DMX is Dark and Hell is Hot. Black Star dropped an album. Jay-Z, Hard Knock Life, Volume 1. Pete Rock, Soul Survivor. Lauryn Hill, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Gangstar, Moment of Truth. Killer Priest. That one I was kind of sketchy on, but I think they did come out. It was Killer Priest's debut album, Heavy Mental. Big Pun, Capital Punishment. Outkast, Aquemini. DMX's other joint, his second. Remember, DMX dropped the album twice in 1998. Unheard of in hip hop. At least I think so. Nori's first solo album, N-O-R-E. Scarface, Double CD. Talked about that on the previous podcast about double albums. Go check that out in hip hop. Called My Homies. Lyricist Lounge Volume 1. Helter Skelter second album came out. Redman, Onyx shut him down. Onyx on the Low has 3 straight dope albums. Don't sleep. Goody Mob still standing. Juvenile released his album Cash Money. 8 Ball, another double album I mentioned. Busta Rhymes, what's the Eternal, whatever it's called. Cannabis debut album also dropped in 1998. Sons of Man, probably somewhat close to Killer Army, but the only Wu affiliates that I actually really dug their music, to be honest. Devin the Dude, I think that was his first album, The Dude. Fat Joe, Don Connor, Gina. M.O.P. released the album. I believe this was either the album on Rockefeller or the album right because I believe the album that was supposed to be on Rockefeller wound up being unreleased, but then released as a project on the side. Maybe this was right before. Bobby Digital, AZ. Man, I can't believe that came out in 98. For some reason, that seems wrong. But as you can see, and there's a number of albums I left out that came out in 1998. Now, before pump your brakes, take a deuce. I know what some people are going to say. Hearing some of those albums, some of them that dropped in 1998, and this is only on the hip hop side, except for Lauryn Hill. That's a little sketchy to call that a hip hop album. But I know what you're going to say. Sure, classic year. Probably the best year in hip hop. Nah, it's not. But we're not going to get into that debate. But I just wanted to make an important statement to say that I think the difference between debating something being like the best year in hip hop is not only the albums that came out. Because there are a lot of years where a lot of good albums came out. I can't think of a year where it was like, yo, nothing came out that year. Or only one good album. Typically, you get a year and you're going to get at least 5 that are good. But 1998 was one of those years where, I mean, out of what I named, you can literally sit with all of this and be entertained. Some people will like more, others more than what's here, but a good portion of these albums are dope and they're not the same. That's what's more important. I don't think any, besides DMX having 2 albums, none of these albums sound the same. If you go and hit play on any one of these albums today, they're all going to sound different from each other. That's what's dope about 1998. That whole fact. But let's give the time some context. 1998, right? This is a year later where we're still dealing with the aftermath of Tupac and Biggie being gone, right? Jay-Z is beginning to rise at this point. You know, he had Reasonable Doubt. Biggie was here. Biggie was murdered. And then he had the second album in my lifetime. And which I was listening to today, man. People always try to say that's Jay-Z's worst album, but it's really not. There's a lot of dope records on there. It's just that the songs that's on there that's not good to people aren't really good. But that was the album where he was trying to get that bad boy rub. So he did a lot of stuff with Puff and it didn't work. On Hard Knock Life, Volume 1, that was Jay-Z's way of coming back to the fold. And that, to this day, I believe is his highest selling album. At least out the gate. I don't know the numbers for all of it. I think it went like 5 million or whatever. So you had Jay-Z rising. You know, you had the emergence of DMX on Def Jam. So much so that he dropped 2 albums. And DMX, just like Jay-Z, filled a void where that Biggie left open. DMX kind of filled a void that Tupac left open. And not to a certain extent where you could make that comparison 1-to-1. Obviously not. But there was something about DMX being a hardcore rapper at a time where shiny suits was all the rage. You know what I'm saying? I believe Jay-Z had one on that second album. Then you had the emergence of, Raucous Records, Lyricist Lounge, Black Star. It's like Under the Underground, but dope. It's starting to come out. Then Gangstar comes out of nowhere. Felt like an eternity passed since we had Hard to Earn. And they come out with Moment of Truth. And it's not dated. It's not like, nah, it's a new school, y'all dead. Outkast comes out with Aquemini. You know what I'm saying? And Goody Mob. And that whole movement, the Dungeon Family. You know what I'm saying? Nori puts out a solo album. Nobody thinks it's going to be good. And it's actually really dope. Like, one of my favorites. Some of the funniest skits ever. Onyx is still hanging around. And Quiet is Kept. The Shut 'Em Down album by Onyx is just as dope as the last 2. Redman was kind of fading. I'm not even going to lie. Dr. Name coming off of Muddy Waters. Muddy Waters is like when you invest early in a company that no one's invested in, and the stocks rise, and now you done went from rags to riches, and you set for life, you balling out, you think you're a mogul. That's the Name was kind of like, hurry up and sell your stock before you're poor again. That's what it felt like. So it kind of felt like the whole era of EPMD, Def Squad, Hit Squad, that whole early 90s, it seems like something was shifting, because another takeaway from these lists of albums is, again, the variety where everybody's coming from. You have Big Pun coming on the scene in 1998, all earlier than that really, but dropping his first album, Capital Punishment, in 1998. And not only is he probably, he is the nicest, like, you know how we be like Eminem is the nicest white boy ever in hip hop. He is. Don't debate me. He is. I don't care what you say about the content. If you can't recognize lyrical skill when you hear it, you're not really into rap as much as you say you are. You're just not. Sometimes you gotta disregard the content and see what he's doing with the words and the schemes and stuff like that. That's what it's about. But Big Pun was all about that. This dude is huge, crazy overweight, breath control, ridiculous. This is 1998, y'all. And then you had Cannabis. Unbelievable rhymes. Highly anticipated. I'm not gonna lie. When I heard there was a bidding war for Cannabis, You know, it was so many dope labels around at the time. You know, it was almost a no-brainer. Like, he's going to Def Jam. You're going to be under somebody. Def Jam. Then that's, you know, you saw him working with Nas, and then kind of like, he's going to be with Dre. He's going to be, maybe going to be part of the firm, blah, blah, blah. But no, he signed with Wyclef. And Wyclef, Carnival album was alright, and the Fugees had a hit, and Lauren had a hit at the time, and it just seemed like it didn't work, and it didn't work. And then you also obviously had Lauryn Hill, first solo album, Miseducation, Lauryn Hill. Not a lot of rapping, cleaning up at the Grammys, scared the hell out of her, obviously, because we never got anything remotely close to that album, let alone what she did with the Fugees. It was almost like the gift and the curse when it came to Lauryn Hill's success with that album. It's kind of like she made an album and poured her heart into it, but she did not want this much attention. And I believe it scared her. But that was the climate of 1998. Tupac and Biggie's gone. Cash Money Records, No Limit Records is around. You know what I'm saying? Snoop is on No Limit Records, putting out whack albums, at least in the beginning. A lot of storylines to 1998. Let's talk about some of the albums, though. Let's like really get into some of the albums. Now, again, I'm not the type of dude where I own all these albums, but I think at one point in time, I came very close to owning damn near every album I see on this list. Let me just name off a few. Maybe you feel like I should go out and get them. I've never owned Pete Rock Soul Survivor. Now, that's definitely not an indictment of it being whack to me, or me not feeling it. I'm just the type of dude, when the music becomes overwhelming, I go for what I know and what I have in front of me. And I was a big Jay-Z fan. Black Star was exciting. I was a big Lauryn Hill fan. Pun was exciting. I was an Outkast fan. I became an Outkast fan really off the strength of Elevators. When I heard that, I was like, man, what am I friends for? I like everything they put out. Let me just jump on the wagon. I was a Capone Noriega fan, so I was kind of looking for it. So like, I was anticipating the Cannabis album. So there was just a lot there that certain things I just wasn't paying attention to be honest. And I think for Pete Rock Soul Survivor, you gotta remember, like, it was like there was a moment where it felt like even though he didn't disappear, it felt like Pete Rock disappeared. And I just felt like hip hop music was going in a direction that I was comfortable with. Whereas there are some hip hop fans around 1998, they feel like even before that, maybe 97, you know, was kind of the beginning of the end for traditional hip hop to be at the forefront. Like a group like Black Star would have had more exposure had it not been for the shiny suit era and making money. But that's what makes 1998 so dope. A lot of these records were successful, and they're not all shiny suits. Like, really, none of them. Because I left Mace's album off of that list. Mace's debut album came out that year. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, and the Lox debut album, the Shiny Suit album. Really, they're the main ones with the shiny suits. Didn't they have it on the cover of their album? But nobody else ever did. Not even Mace. But yeah, I think, you know, on the radio commercially, hip hop was going in a place, but people still respected skill and your craft. And obviously later, P Rock Soul Survivor, you know, found my ear, and I was in a place where I could accept it a little bit more. But I was just at a time, man, where I wanted to go where hip hop was going. And that's how I feel now. Like, there are a lot of cats who don't like particular artists, especially those who are big, like Chance the Rapper or Kendrick Lamar, even Drake in some cases. But to me, I always try to find you know, what is it that makes this popular, you know? And, you know, obviously it can't be, you know, oh, we got a lot of money, because I don't care about that. But when you look at a year like 1998, and it didn't matter. Like, it was just a lot of music coming. Like, it took me a minute to even get on to Black Star's album. I knew the singles, but that was it. So what do I like? Let me see. What on here do I own? If you're looking at the cover while you're listening to this, except for P-Rock Soul Survivor, I own the whole top row, the whole second row. Killer Priest's Heavy Mental. If you know me by now, listen to this podcast, you know I'm a hip hop fan that loves variety. I don't love variety for variety's sake, but every now and again I like to get in my conscious bag. And Heavy Mental is the type of hip hop where every bar, every verse, every song, every hook is like a lesson, but not a lesson in a way where, you know, you might just be listening to a bunch of speeches. But when I heard Bible, basic instructions before leaving Earth, it was just something that somebody or nobody's ever done in hip hop before. And it kind of really got me into Killer Priest. And in 98, again, with all these distractions, all these dope albums, it was nothing like anything I had. And that's what attracted me to it. Gang Starr's Moment of Truth. You know what I'm saying? The way I felt about Pete Rock and Soul Survivor, and I drug my feet just to get to listening to it. Gang Starr had more of a personal space in my collection as a huge fan from maybe the Step in the Arena album on. But when Moment of Truth dropped, I heard those beats and that Inspect the Deck Above the Clouds verse that I believe got like hip hop quotable in the source. I think the source gave Moment of Truth like 5 mics, I think, or 4.5. Somebody leave that in the comment section. I don't remember. But I felt like, damn, so much has happened. So many people are better than Guru now as MCs. Am I even gonna like a new Gang Starr album? Let me tell you this. If you're a Gang Starr fan, and maybe my favorite Gang Starr album is Daily Operation. Let's get it out the way. It's just my favorite album. I just love that album. It's the replayability of it is bar none. Like, I want to listen to it now. That's how much I like it. It's just perfect. But it fit a certain time. Whereas Moment of Truth came out at a time where it was just like, you know, I might be shiny suit all day. I might just go into this conscious stuff. Like, is this just going to be old school? And it was anything but that. Very dope album. Aquemini. Now, this definitely got 5 mics in the sauce. Aquemini, Outkast's album, third album. Aquemini drops. 5 mics in the source. Well, no, this is Outkast's 4th album, I believe, because I believe Stankonia might have been their 3rd album. Can't remember. I'm drinking Douce. What do you expect? But I kind of, you know, I was on the fence with Outkast. You know what I'm saying? Because it was a thing where, you know, during the Southern Playalistic days, I listened to, or watched the videos, and, you know, I liked the records. But I was feeling like, but can I hear a whole album of that? I don't know. So I never heard those albums in the early days. And then when Elevators came out, I'm like, man, this record is so dope. And I remember people telling me, yeah, that Outkast album is dope. But again, this is talking about the second album, ATLs. But I was still kind of, and it just kind of happened that way. But I remember, because of all that was being said about Aquemini, and the minute you hit play and Return of the Gangster comes on, and then that's when it clicks, you know, this is why people like this. You know what I'm saying? This is why people say you should check out the Outkast album. That album is a classic. But we're going to get into whether there's some classics here. But that's definitely one. DMX releases another 2 albums in the same year, 1998. 2 albums. And what's really, really, really crazy about that, if I could tell you a quick story, is I worked at a sneaker store one summer, and I remember, you know what I'm saying, like, cause a lot of these albums dropped around the same time. I remember Nori was kind of new. This was like May, I think, or June or whatever. Maybe it was more June. But Nori had dropped. Pun had dropped. DMX first album dropped. And I remember everybody was playing them joints all the time. And I remember towards the tail end of the summers, my sister come home like, yeah, I got this new DMX album. And I'm thinking like, how? That's a bootleg. Like, that can't be DMX album. He just put out an album 2 months ago or whatever it was. She was like, no, this is real. He got another one. He was dripped in blood. I'm like, this gotta be fake. But lo and behold, DMX put out 2 albums in the same year and it was hot now. The logic was for the record label, DMX is hot, white hot right now. That means he's really hot. And this is kind of foul when you think about it, but they wanted to strike while the iron was hot. They wanted to capitalize off of his popularity. They didn't feel like he was the type of artist you could have that one album and just wait. People wouldn't wait. And maybe in some cases they didn't feel his style of music had any longevity, which was somewhat true, but him falling off in a year, I mean, damn. But nevertheless, we got 2 DMX albums in 2008. Now, the Nori album, it's not no lyrical masterpiece, but it is very, very dope. Body in the Trunk with Nas. What's the other joint band from TV? The Posse Cut. The Animal Thug skit. Very dope, memorable album. He never had an album like this after that. All his albums after that were basically whack. Like even that Melvin Flint joint, there was a good 3 records on there. But the NORE joint, I mean, what more can you say? Again, and I think more importantly, like when you think about all these albums from 1998, including Cannabis's debut album, that was such a huge disappointment, we also got to look at the fact that the Source magazine did that cover that I believe this was their goal, and this is how I took it. But they had the cover of the, Rap's New Generation. And they featured like Silk the Shocker, DMX, Pun, and Peter Guns and Lord Tariq and Cannabis. All these cats that were new, that were on. It was really like Double XL's freshman cover before that happened, with a way more credible list. But it was because it was like Tupac and Biggie died, and then we just got the floodgates opened with different rappers, some of them biting, but with different rappers and styles. And, it just makes you wonder what would have been if those guys weren't gone. But as a result, we got a mixed bag of really dope hip hop in 1998. Now, like I said early on in the podcast, is 1998 the best year in hip hop? No. Is it the best year in the 90s? Hell no. But it was a very, very good year. Now, how many albums on this cover that I'm looking at that I created, leaving out the ones I forgot or couldn't add because of space, how many of these are personal classics? Like, what I define as a classic is an album that not only do I enjoy, but I could step away from it for years, hit play, and all of those feelings, all of that nostalgia, memories, I still know the lyrics. All of that comes back within hitting the play button, and you want to hear the whole record. To me, that's kind of what a classic does. So classic doesn't mean I can listen to that joint every day, all day. No, there are plenty of classics. Ask me when's the last time I heard Paid in Full, but ask me if that's a hip hop classic. Ask me when's the last time I heard Paid in Full in its entirety. That's what I should say. It's just not an album that I go back to, but that doesn't mean it's not a classic album. So out of the albums I have on this page, what do I consider classics? Personal classics. Let me say that to be clear. I don't know, y'all. I think Jay-Z's Hard Knock Life Volume 1 is a personal classic for me. I know there was a huge divide on that album because it had so many features. But I just love all the beats that was on there. I love the songs. Jay-Z was just, like, we know he's been rapping for years, man, but that was kind of like a peak. I mean, he went higher than that. But man, he was at the top of his game, and I consider that a classic. I consider The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill a classic album. I consider Big Pun's Capital Punishment a classic album. When I say classic, I'm saying 5 mics. Doesn't mean the rest of these albums are whack. It just means I think these albums that I'm naming aren't perfect, but they damn close to being perfect, in my opinion. Outkast's Aquemini is a classic, in my opinion. Personal, maybe more nostalgia classic for me is Nori's album. And as far as everything else that I have up here, like MOP and Don Cartagena and Bobby Digital and AZ's first album, none of those are classics to me. So, as you can see, like I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of years that have a lot of dope albums, but it's more about the impact. And to me, an average year in hip hop can give you at least 5 projects that are really good. But it's those special years where you're looking at 10, 15, maybe even 20 really solid albums. To me, that's like defines a really good year. And for me to name maybe 5 albums I consider personal classics on this list is not bad. But it doesn't really rank above me reading off that 1988 list. That, on the other hand, might as well be the beginning of the time, like hip hop BC. You know what I'm saying? But what do you think about 1998? Great year for hip hop. Did I leave some albums out that you thought should have been mentioned? Are all of these personal classics? Are you the type of dude that owns all of these albums? Let it be known in the comment section below. That's going to do it for me on this episode of Hip Hop Now Podcast on vacation, sponsored by Duce, but not really. Please note that this podcast is available on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Spreaker, TuneIn, Podbean, and more importantly, SoundCloud.com/HipHopNowPodcast. And out of all things I said up here, I am not a critic. I'm a fan. Peace.
Drop it on the random.